Hi everyone. My name is Kyle, and I'm here to talk a little bit about my long COVID recovery journey. Amy reached out to me from Positively COVID and asked me to share my story, which I'm more than happy to do because I also spend a lot of time trying to promote positive content around long COVID recovery, because I personally struggled for around 2 years with very intense long COVID. I initially got COVID in October 2020, and it was a very strange time for me because for a long time I had been a very busy, active young man. I was studying at university. I was in a relationship with my girlfriend. I liked to have fun with my friends. I played a lot of sport, very, very active exercise. I was playing hockey, I was cycling, I was kite surfing, I was going to the gym. I was literally exercising like 24/7. So I got COVID, and then all these weird symptoms started to build up, and over time it got worse and worse as a number of factors. It's difficult to compress it all into a short video, but I will try to focus on what helped me. But just to lay the groundwork a little bit, the symptoms really built up as I became more concerned about them, right? So the more I focused on trying to fix my symptoms, then they just built up and became more and more intense, really, as my stress levels increased around the symptoms. And the thing is, the symptoms were very, very physical. I was very debilitated. I ended up dropping out of university, ending my relationship with my girlfriend, having to stop exercising for around a year and a half, which was probably one of the hardest things. I had to stop playing hockey, stop cycling, stop kite surfing, I had to quit my job or take a break from work. So a huge period of change for me. And at the time, very intense, very scary, a lot to deal with, a lot of emotional stuff. It was really tough. There was periods when I thought this was going to be my life for years and years to come. And I don't want to scare anybody, but I want you to know that it got very dark for me, and things turned out good, right? So that's why I'm talking about the scary stuff. I'm not trying to trigger anybody or, incite fear in you, but I feel it's helpful to share, because here's the thing. I talk a lot about recovery online, and whenever I talk about it in places where there's a lot of negativity, people's first reactions to recovery is that, if you recovered, you must have had it easy, or maybe you weren't sick at all. Maybe it was all mental. Maybe it was all in your head. And, there are elements of the stress in my mind that was making things worse, but my physical symptoms were incredibly intense. So I just wanted to add that in there. That's why I feel like it's important to touch on that. Loads of fatigue, really bad headaches, very bad post-exertional malaise, just so much intense things going on in the body, and it was very debilitating, right? As I mentioned, all the things I had to stop doing. I'm sure many people can relate to that. I'm not going to spend too much time diving into the symptoms. So what happened for me on my journey is there was a very big contrast between the first year and the second year. The first year was the downhill phase for me. I got more and more symptoms, and my life got smaller and smaller, and I got more and more afraid, and it all culminated in me hitting rock bottom, basically, where I thought, this is it, I'm never going to recover. I've had this thing for a year and a half, and I'm not getting anywhere, and there's all this focusing on time. How long has this been happening for? And time and focusing on symptoms, right? Those are the things that keep us stuck in these states. So what shifted, there's many different things that shifted for me, and this is why I talk about this online, and I record many videos, because there's so many different aspects. But I think if I try and highlight the key points, it was shifting beliefs around recovery, right? So that's what's beautiful of what Amy is doing with Positively COVID is it's really important to watch recovery stories if you don't believe that you can recover, right? So if the narrative in your mind is still that I'm going to be stuck forever, maybe I've got ME, CFS, that's what happened to me, is I started to believe that I was going to be stuck like people that I was reading on chronic fatigue syndrome forums for years and years and years. And it brought up a lot of fear, right? So first, understand that, right? Work on the very negative beliefs. And the best way to do that is just to watch positive, uplifting recovery stories. That's what I had to do. And then the next phase for me, there's so many different aspects, right? There's pacing. I don't talk too much about that because for me, I had to focus on coming out of too strict a pacing, but it varies from person to person, right? Somebody that, is just boom busting all the time, maybe a little bit more energy management and pacing would be wise. But it really depends on where somebody's at, because for me, I was living from a place of fear-based pacing, super, super strict activity scheduling and pacing, and it was stressing me out way more than it was helping me. Same with diet. I also was very fixated on super strict elimination diets, and it was just basically the main thing I had to get to the root of was my stress and my anxiety. And again, people don't like to acknowledge this because it makes it sound like it's all in your head. And that's not what I'm saying. You have physical symptoms, right? And it's not your fault. But there is, for me, doing a lot of work around my nervous system and realizing that the cause of my symptoms was a oversensitized and dysregulated nervous system. So then I had to learn nervous system regulation. And meditation was very, very helpful for me. A mixture of meditation and learning to work with my symptoms from a place of acceptance, allowance, and compassion, right? So again, there's so many different aspects, right? So often somebody listens to one of these stories and they'll hear something I'll say and I just can't cover everything, right? So the point of this video is to try and touch on the main things. And one of the main things I always come back to talking about when I'm sharing with somebody who's recovering from long COVID or I'm working with somebody is that I had to learn to really have a different perspective on my symptoms. And I trained myself over a decent period of time that whenever symptoms came up, I stopped seeing it as the reason that I was going to never recover and started to learn that every time a symptom comes up, this is my opportunity to retrain my response by sitting with the symptom and really just accepting it, right? That right now there is a headache and there's nothing I can do about that headache, but there's a big difference between fighting against that headache and actually saying, hey, you know what, headache, you're allowed to be here and I accept you with compassion, right? And that might be scary and weird at first, and it was for me as well. But over time, I really started to learn to cultivate this compassion for my symptoms, which again, can sound weird, but it was very powerful practice for me because it stopped this habitual stress response that I was locked in that was keeping me in sympathetic, dysregulated nervous system. And through that, over time, things started to shift. So again, it took me quite a lot of practice around meditation, around compassion work, around brain retraining. I did a brain retraining course. I read a few books, and like all this happened over time, right? Again, often when I talk about reading books, people will, react and say, I can't read a book. It's okay. There was many phases that I went through, right? It was like over 2 years. So it's difficult to cover everything in a short video. But long story short, after 2 years, and this journey took me very deep, from the perspective after having recovered after 2 years, and really some dark times when I was so depressed and very didn't want to exist anymore at times. It was so intense. And I was able to start to do the things that I enjoyed again. And to be honest, this was the best thing that ever happened to me. Honestly, it took me on a deep spiritual journey as well, which I won't go into too much here because I know the focus here is on health and long COVID, but I talk about that as well. So I've got a YouTube channel where I talk about long COVID recovery. That's where I started, was to just try and promote positive content as well, like Amy's doing. And nowadays I talk more about spirituality because that's where the path took me. So that's a little bit of an aside, but it is important, and I do want to share that here as well, is this long COVID health thing took me way deeper than just health and illness, right? It really took me on a much deeper path of understanding myself, of having to let go of all of my identities and see what was there when everything that I thought I was crumbling around me. And that was important for my recovery because it gave me a bigger context to work in, right? I needed to go down a spiritual path to kind of help recover. And people think that's weird often, but I do feel like it's important to mention because without that foundation at some point, and it only came later on in the journey when I'd really been beaten down and battered by life, that I started to open to this deeper perspective that this was meant to happen to me, and I needed to learn the lessons from it. And it was okay that I didn't like that. It was okay that there was a part of me that was struggling, that was hurting, I had to learn to integrate that. I had to learn to soothe that part of myself. I had to learn to love that part of myself. So all of that was really important. There's this deeper context. And if you ever check out any of my content, you might be surprised because it's a lot more spiritual in nature than it is in health. But that's what I enjoy talking about now. So anyways, I'll try and keep it not too long, but I did just want to say that, this can be a very challenging journey, and there will be periods where you will maybe be overwhelmed, and I just want to tell you that in the long run, everything works out okay. But, sometimes we have to do some really difficult, deep inner work. That was for me, right? When I work with somebody on their recovery or spiritual path, you can't really avoid the difficult stuff, right? We can find ways to learn to navigate it, and on the other side it's fine, right? All the difficult phases, and they were super difficult, trust me, served me massively. But I completely empathize with anybody on this path about how challenging it can be, how scary it can be, how lost you can feel. And I hope that me sharing can offer you some hope and knowing that things can work out in the long run, for sure, absolutely. I truly believe that every single person can recover from this, no matter what. And people often argue with me about this, but I'm not standing down on that ever. I think absolutely everybody can recover from this. But more important than recover, I think you can really use this as a deep opportunity for me, this is what it was to get to the roots of suffering in general. Because the way I recovered was I came to a place where it no longer mattered whether I had symptoms or not. Honestly, it can sound crazy and it will trigger resistance in your mind, and that's okay. I'm not judging you at all for that. But that was all I had to, that was all I could do, because everything else I tried failed, and I was left in this place where all I could do was learn to unpack all of the resistance around my symptoms. And again, it took time. But for me, that's why I say I don't focus too much on health. Again, it's a holistic thing, but it can really take you to the roots of understanding the own mechanisms that make us really struggle in life, if that makes sense. And we have to be willing to open up to what life is trying to show us. That's how I would put it. That was huge for me, as I had to learn to go with life. So if I was having symptoms, I had to learn to be like, okay, this is tough, this is scary, I don't like this, but there's something here for me. And I had to learn to sit with difficult sensations. I had to learn to sit with the pain, with the discomfort, and over time, it really did improve. So, this really can be a deep path. I know it's not for everybody. Some people recover without going down the spiritual path, but that was my story. So, and that's all I can really share from. I've worked with a lot of people, so I have a broad perspective on this, but always I am sharing from my experience and perspective. So yeah, I think that's enough. And yeah, just sending love and strength, and just know that you'll be okay. And yeah, well done for, you know, if you're watching recovery stories, you're on the right path, right? You're not like just reading negative doom scrolling content on Reddit or Facebook or something. So keep at it. You've got this. All right. All the best.